The signal that changed everything. The stars had always been silent. For centuries, humanity believed they were alone. They built their cities, fought their wars, and reached for the sky with trembling hands. When they finally broke through the atmosphere and touched the void, they found no gods waiting, only emptiness and the cold indifference of space. But they kept going. By the time humanity joined the Galactic Council, they were already considered strange. Other species had evolved slowly, carefully, with millennia of guidance from elder civilizations. Humans arrived like wildfire, chaotic, unpredictable, and impossibly fast. Within 3 generations, they had colonized a dozen worlds. Within 5, they had built trade routes that older empires took centuries to establish. The Council watched them with suspicion. Some called humanity reckless, others called them dangerous. A few quietly called them hopeful, but none of them expected what would come next. The signal arrived on a Tuesday. It wasn't a grand transmission, no dramatic call for help echoing through the void. It was weak, fractured, barely more than static. Most species didn't even notice it. But Earth's deep space monitoring stations caught it, and within hours the message was decoded. This is colony vessel Kaivaran. Under attack, harvesters. No survivors expected. Anyone. Please. Then silence. The Galactic Council had heard of the harvesters before. Ancient machines, older than memory, that swept through the outer rim every few thousand years. They consumed everything, ships, stations, entire planets. They didn't negotiate. They didn't communicate. They simply took, and now they were back. The Council convened within a day. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Grand Chamber above Zenith Station. Their voices a storm of panic and accusation. "We must evacuate the outer colonies," said Ambassador Takora of the Velixians, her scales shimmering with fear. "Pull back our forces. Fortify the core worlds." "Agreed," said the Dranith delegate, his 3 eyes scanning the room. "The harvesters cannot be fought. History proves this. We must survive, not resist." One by one, the Council voted. Evacuation, withdrawal, survival. No one suggested helping the colonies. No one suggested fighting back. The human delegate sat in silence through it all. Admiral Ruth Hammond stood on the bridge of the Valiant, Earth's flagship, and watched the stars through the viewport. She was 53 years old, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of calm that only comes from seeing too much. "Ma'am," said Lieutenant Chen, stepping up beside her, "the Council has made its decision. Full retreat. They're abandoning the outer rim." Hammond didn't look away from the stars. "How many people are out there?" "In the affected zones?" "Approximately 4 million, spread across 12 colonies. Mixed species. Mostly refugees who couldn't afford core world housing. And the Council is leaving them." "Yes, ma'am." Hammond was quiet for a long time. Behind her, the bridge crew worked in hushed efficiency, running diagnostics and monitoring feeds. They knew what was coming. They always did when the Admiral went silent like this. Finally, she spoke. "Send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we're moving the Valiant and her escort group into the outer rim." Chen blinked. "Ma'am, the Council voted." "I don't answer to the Council," Hammond said calmly. "I answer to Earth, and Earth doesn't leave people behind." "But Admiral, the harvesters are a problem we'll deal with when we get there." She turned to face him, her expression hard but not unkind. "Lieutenant, do you know why humanity survived every extinction event on our homeworld? It wasn't because we were the strongest or the smartest. It was because we protected each other. When one of us fell, the rest stood together. That's what we do." Chen hesitated, then saluted. "Yes, ma'am. I'll send the message." As he walked away, Hammond returned to the viewport. Far out in the black, beyond the reach of even the strongest sensors, she knew the harvesters were moving. Ancient, unstoppable, uncaring. But so was she. The signal reached Earth 6 hours later. In the Parliament of Nations, President Amara Okafor stood before the assembly, her hands gripping the podium. Behind her, the holographic projection of the outer rim flickered, red zones spreading like blood through water. "They're asking us not to go," she said quietly. "The Council, the Empires, they say the harvesters are beyond us. They say we're too young, too small, too weak." The chamber was silent. "They're probably right." Okafor's voice didn't waver. "We've only been in space for 100 years. We don't have the weapons they have. We don't have the ships. We don't have their technology. She paused, lifting her gaze. But we have something they don't. We have each other, and we have a choice. The projection behind her shifted, showing the faces of refugees, aliens and humans alike, huddled in shelters, staring at empty skies. These people called for help, Okafor said, and no one answered. No one but us. So I'm asking you now, not as your president, but as a human being, what do we do? The vote took less than a minute. Unanimous, by dawn the fleet was moving. 12 ships led by the Valiant, their engines burning bright against the dark. They weren't the largest fleet. They weren't the most advanced, but they were coming. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy heard a new sound. Humanity, refusing to run. The fleet that refused to run, the news spread across the galaxy like a shockwave. Humanity is going to the outer rim. At first, no one believed it. The younger species thought it was a mistake, a misunderstanding in translation. The older empires assumed it was posturing, some kind of political theater meant to win favor with the refugees. But when the human fleet's trajectory was confirmed, when sensors across 3 sectors picked up their warp signatures heading toward the Harvester Zone, the galaxy fell silent. Then came the mockery. Fools, said High Chancellor Vrex of the Crathan Dominion, his mandibles clicking with disdain. They rushed toward extinction like moths to flame. Let them learn what happens to the arrogant. Perhaps, Ambassador Takora murmured, watching the tactical display. We should have warned them more clearly. We did warn them, Vrex replied coldly. They chose not to listen. That is not our failure, it is theirs. But not everyone laughed. In the archives of the eldest, the beings who remembered when stars were young, one voice spoke into the darkness. They're doing it again. Doing what? Being human. Captain Owen Briggs stood in the cargo bay of the Morning Star, watching his crew load the last of the supplies. The Morning Star wasn't a warship. She was a freight hauler, 20 years old, patched together with salvaged parts and stubborn hope. Her hull was scarred from 1,000 jumps. Her engines wheezed like an old man climbing stairs, and her weapons systems consisted of exactly 2 defense turrets that hadn't been fired in anger since the day they were installed. But she was fast. And she was here. Captain, said his first mate Jenna Park, climbing down from the upper deck. We're loaded. Medical supplies, food packs, emergency shelters, everything we could cram in. Good. Briggs ran a hand through his graying hair. What about the manifests? All logged. We're officially registered as a humanitarian relief vessel under Earth jurisdiction. She paused. Owen, are you sure about this? The Valiant and her escorts are one thing. They're military, but us? Briggs looked at her steadily. Jenna, you've been with me for 12 years. In all that time, have I ever left someone behind? No. Then why would I start now? She smiled despite herself. You're a stubborn bastard, you know that? I've been called worse. He turned toward the bridge. Let's get moving. We've got people waiting. As the Morning Star lifted off from the lunar dock, Briggs watched Earth shrink behind them, blue and green and impossibly fragile. Somewhere down there, his daughter was watching the news, probably terrified. He'd left her a message before launching. Be brave, sweetheart. Dad's going to help some people. I'll be home soon. He hoped it wasn't a lie. The human fleet moved through the void in tight formation. At its center was the Valiant, a heavy cruiser built for endurance rather than elegance. Her armor was thick, her shields redundant, and her crew consisted of 3,000 souls who had volunteered for this mission, knowing full well they might not return. Around her flew the escorts, 6 destroyers, 3 frigates and 2 support carriers loaded with fighters and drones. Every ship bore the same marking, a blue world surrounded by stars, with 2 words beneath it, Terra stands on the bridge of the Valiant. Admiral Hammond reviewed the tactical situation. How long until we reach the first colony? She asked. 18 hours at current speed, Lieutenant Chen replied. The colony is Vela 7, population 300,000, mixed species, mostly Velixian refugees, some human settlers, and the harvesters. Chen's expression darkened. They hit the outer defenses 6 hours ago. Last transmission said the orbital stations were destroyed. No word since. Hammond absorbed this in silence. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet intensity. They knew what they were heading toward. They'd all seen the records, grainy footage from the last harvester incursion centuries ago. Ships torn apart like paper, stations consumed whole, planets stripped to their cores. "Ma'am," said Commander Reeves, the tactical officer, "I have to ask, even with everything we're bringing, how do we fight something like this?" Hammond turned to face him. "We've been asking ourselves that question since we climbed out of caves, Commander. How do we fight the cold, the dark? Predators twice our size. And every time we found an answer, not because we were stronger, but because we refused to give up." She gestured to the viewport where the fleet moved in perfect synchronization. "Look at them. 12 ships against an enemy that has destroyed civilizations. The smart play? Run, hide, survive. But that's not what we do." Her voice was steel-wrapped in quiet conviction. "We're human. When someone screams in the dark, we run toward the sound." Reeves straightened, something shifting in his eyes. "Yes, ma'am." Across the galaxy, others watched. In the council chambers, holographic displays tracked the human fleet's progress. Some representatives had already left, unwilling to witness what they assumed would be a massacre. Others stayed, unable to look away. "They're still going," whispered a young Dranith observer. "Even now, why?" The elder beside him said nothing for a long time. Then, "Because they're young enough to still believe they matter." On the trading station of Kes 7, a Velixian merchant stood in a bar, watching the news feed with tears streaming down her face. Her family was on Vela 7. She'd given them up for lost when the council voted to retreat. Now humans she'd never met were flying into hell to save them. Why? She whispered to no one. Why would they do this? The human bartender, an old woman with kind eyes, set down a glass. "Because someone has to," she said simply. 16 hours later, the fleet dropped out of warp at the edge of the Vela 7 system. What they found was silence. The orbital stations were gone, not destroyed, but erased, as if they'd never existed. The defense platforms hung in space like broken teeth, and beyond them, at the edge of sensor range, something moved. "Contact," Chen said, his voice tight. "Multiple contacts. Configuration unknown. Mass readings are, ma'am, they're enormous." On the main display, shapes materialized out of the black. They were massive, each one the size of a small moon, their surfaces covered in strange geometric patterns that hurt to look at. They moved with impossible grace, silent and inevitable. The Harvesters. Hammond leaned forward in her chair. All ships, battle stations, shields to maximum. Launch fighters. Across the fleet, alarms screamed to life. Crew members ran to their posts. Weapon systems powered up. The fighters launched in gleaming streams, their engines painting trails of light against the dark. "Ma'am," Reeves said quietly, "they're not attacking. They're just watching us." It was true. The Harvesters had stopped moving, their vast forms hanging in space like sleeping gods. Hammond's jaw tightened. "Then let's wake them up. All ships, open fire." The human fleet lit up the void with fire, and the Harvesters answered.